So my man Steve Kim just dropped a really, really good article. Go check it out at ucnlive.com. And it was based basically on the differences, the pay-per-view model between UFC and boxing. What inspired him to write the article was a friend of his went to a bar to watch that recent UFC card between Amanda Nunes and Ronda Rousey. And a lot of the observations that Steve Kim's friend, I think it was a childhood friend of his, had, and this guy's a lifelong boxing fan. Him and Steve have watched a ton of fights going back, to their childhood. A lot of the same observations he had were the same ones I had that same night when I watched that card in a bar. I was invited by friends of mine who are big into the UFC, so I went out and watched it. Same observations, two different coasts, two different parts of the country saw the same thing. And what Steve's article did, you guys remember I made a rant video about it where I kind of went into some of the demographic stuff and all that. Steve's article went more into the business side of it and the numbers, and he had some industry insiders. He had Mark Taffet, he had some quotes from him and some of the casino executives just talking about the numbers behind this thing. And basically what it comes down to is that UFC, their price structure for these pay-per-views, for pricing them out to commercial establishments, to bars and casinos, places like that, is less than half of what boxing's is, at least here in the United States. And this phenomenon of being able to go see any UFC fight at pretty much any sports bar in America right now, but barely ever seeing boxing at any bar in America these days. It's kind of an American thing. It's kind of limited to America because fight fans in the UK, fight fans in Mexico, other parts of the world will tell you that boxing's on at bars. Boxing's on at casinos and stuff like that, and you can go see it. And UFC isn't a big thing over there, at least not yet. It's a growing sport, and it probably will eventually get big over there if they continue to do what they're doing. But here in America, it's just concerning. Let me break this down for you guys. Like, say you're a regular bar in America. You're a little sports bar, and you can hold 200 patrons. Let's say you got 10 TVs. And the way these things are priced, it's per TV. The licensing and the fees and all that crap. And you could have that Ronda Rousey, Amanda Nunes fight for $4,000. And Ronda Rousey is the biggest brand in UFC history. She's literally the biggest crossover star MMA's ever had, at least in North America. And you can get that fight with their biggest star, the biggest name ever, for $4,000. And based on past business you've done and the research you've done, that you're gonna fill your bar up. You're gonna get all 200 people, to fill up your bar. So you start to do the math and you figure you will need all 200 people to average $20 of business to get your money back. Well, $20, that's what, 2 beers? You can't even get 2 beers for $20, at least in LA, but in most parts of the country now, $20 is maybe 2 beers, right? You know that probably 100 people are gonna show up just for the main event, but there's gonna be 100 people that show up for the preliminary fights. And they're gonna come in there and have 2, 3, 4, 5 beers. They're gonna get nachos and pretzels, whatever, bar food. You're gonna make money. It's profitable. You can't wait for the next UFC card if you're an average bar. Even if you're a small bar with 2 TVs, well, maybe it cost you $2,000, right? And you could get 100 people in there. It's the same math. You need those people to come in and spend $20. So you don't have to charge a cover. You can put on the fights. They're independently distributed most of the time. You're buying a UFC event. You're not necessarily buying an HBO event or a Showtime event. So the pricing and everything's different. And the promoter's putting it on, there's one promoter you deal with, and that's the UFC. So if you do business with them, you have all sorts of marketing research and data and analysis. You know what your bar can do, and you know if it's profitable or not. And that's why it's on everywhere. That's why it's on at sports bars and just dive bars everywhere. That's why it's on. Even in restaurants, you'll see some of these UFC pay-per-view events on. Now, you compare that to boxing, where let's just say for the sake of argument that Terrence Crawford and Manny Pacquiao end up fighting this year. For the same bar, it's going to cost you $8,000. It's likely going to cost you more than that, but let's just stick with double. Let's just say $8,000. Well, now you start running the numbers, and it's even if you could get all 200 people in. Well, now, yeah, you need them to average $40, but based on past experience you've done with boxing, you're probably only getting 100 people to come in. You're not getting all 200. You're getting 100 people to come in. So now you need those 100 people to average $80 of business. Now, maybe let's say you've crunched the numbers and the average fight crowd does an average of $60 per business. So to break even, you got to charge a $20 cover. You see where I'm going here? You got to charge these 100 fans that will come in $20 just to come in. And then you got to hope they spend $60 a pop to make your money back. And again, I'm pricing low for a Pacquiao Crawford pay-per-view. And then we get back to the demographics discussion, which I know makes a lot of you uncomfortable, but let's be honest. A lot of the same people that were going out to watch Ronda Rousey, the biggest crossover star ever in UFC, a lot of those people probably know who Manny Pacquiao is, but the overwhelming majority have no idea who Terrence Crawford is. And based on what happened with Pacquiao and Floyd Mayweather back in 2015, a lot of those same fans probably don't give a damn about Manny Pacquiao anymore. Now, you're going to get those boxing diehards, right? That maybe can't afford HBO, can't afford the pay-per-view, so they'd rather go to a bar. And that's what I'm talking about, those 100 people versus the 200 people. You just start doing the math here and you start to understand why boxing's failing. And I don't know how we necessarily fix it, because even if let's forget about the pay-per-view stuff. If you look at just regular fights, the UFC fights are on, Fox, Spike, all that kind of stuff. Like stars, like actual names in that sport, not just prospects or whatever. And good solid matchups. So any bar with a basic cable package, they don't have to pay the extra premium for HBO and Showtime. Basic cable package. Boom, you could put on a UFC fight. And maybe you got a college football game on this TV and you got a basketball game going here. But on this TV over there, you can put on Spike TV and there's that UFC fight. And fans that want to see that, who want to go out and have a beer, boom, they know they could go to their local sports bar and that fight will be on. If you're a boxing fan, the overwhelming majority of the fights, the good fights, are on HBO and Showtime. The big names, the stars, generally speaking, are on HBO and Showtime. And for a bar to show those cards, they have to buy the package, the HBO or Showtime package. They have to pay for a year of that. And that's cheaper than, here's what's interesting. Buying the HBO package for an entire year at a bar is cheaper than putting on one pay-per-view event. Isn't that crazy? But even though it's cheaper, if you're a bar, do you want to pay that money to show HBO when a lot of people already have HBO? They're not going to come to a bar to watch a regular HBO fight because they already have HBO. Again, you start doing the math on that. Is it profitable? Does it make sense? Maybe for a casino or something, but if you're just a dive bar in anywhere America, the numbers don't add up. It doesn't make sense. And I know some of the PBC fans will say, well, that's what PBC is trying to fix and everything. Okay, here's the issue though. There's only so many dates and those PBC guys don't fight very often. Several of their fighters didn't even fight in 2016. The majority of their top fighters and stars only fought once. You got a guy like Danny Jacobs, whose last really great fight that people were interested in was against Peter Quillen in late 2015. He didn't do much in 2016, and now the biggest matchup of his career is going to HBO pay-per-view. So he's been, even though he's a PBC guy, he's been sucked into that model. You look at some of the other top guys, and they're fighting on Showtime, even though it's PBC. So they're still part of that thing too. So, you take the Deontay Wilders and Keith Thurman and Danny Garcia. I believe that's on Showtime. I think Badu Jack and James DeGale is Showtime. Don't quote. I think that's the one. is Showtime. So those great cards in January that PBC has, they've gone to Showtime. So again, regular bars in America can't even show those because PBC needs that money that they're getting, that license fee that Showtime is paying them. It's all just part of this system that, guys, it's broken. It's archaic. Read the article that Steve Kim wrote where he basically referred to boxing's system right now, at least in the United States. The pay-per-view model, the cable model, the way it's all structured is basically Blockbuster video in the age of Netflix. And that's what's going on here. It's undeniable. And it's just concerning if you're a boxing fan. Right now, boxing has that diehard market, but it continues to dwindle and dwindle and dwindle because you're not building young, new fans. You are with the existing fans that are teaching boxing to their kids and introducing them to the sport or maybe their friends, but that continues to dwindle because a lot of these kids are saying, Dad, Grandpa, Great-Grandpa, I don't like boxing. I like this thing, UFC. This is more cool. And my friends like this. You know, it's the peer pressure or whatever. Building that up, boxing just continues to get smaller and smaller. And it's like you're milking that smaller fan base more and more and charging them more and more and more because you have to maintain your profit. How do we fix this? It's so complex. It's so insanely complex. It's like the tax code here in the United States, you know, where the Democrats will say blah, 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 blah. The Republicans say blah, 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 blah. But neither of them can fix it. It's too fucked. And I just wonder sometimes if that's the deal with the structure of boxing in the United States and if it's just going to continue to become more and more and more and more of a niche sport here, or if something can be done to blow this thing up. One thing that's certain is after Mayweather-Pacquiao in May of 2015, it kind of did blow up. It kind of imploded. And I think people really said, no more. And there's been several times in boxing history where that's kind of happened, at least in the pay-per-view era, where fans said, man, this pay-per-view sucked. We got ripped off. No more of this crap. And they eventually came back around because boxing was the only ticket in town if you were into martial arts for, you know, big fights. And there was no internet. There was no cutting the cord in streaming services. Now there is. Now you really can pull the plug on your cable and stream everything. And more people are doing that. And there's another ticket in town, and that's the UFC. So that's the difference. A lot of boxing people have their head in the sand, and they're thinking, yeah, Mayweather-Pacquiao blew shit up, but they'll come back. They'll come back. Are they? It's different now. This isn't the 90s. This isn't like, you know, Fan Man, how a lot of people were just pissed after Fan Man, and they're like, boxing's a circus. I'm never buying it again. And they did. It's a different world now. So I don't know. I'm just more and more, I'm just getting really, really concerned about this. And I understand boxing's thriving in markets like the UK. It's always going to be a big sport in Mexico and other parts of Latin America. Even in Asia, there's a growing market for it over there in some of the Asian countries. But man, here in the United States, where this is still the grand stage in boxing because of the history here, it's just dwindling more and more and more. What can we do to fix this?